Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Rashmi Sinha from Faculty of Anthropology, Indira Gandhi National Open University. Today, I am going to discuss the module Demonstration of Field Methods in Socio-Cultural Anthropology under the paper Research Methods and Fieldwork. The learning objectives of the module are: after you will be going through this module, you will be able to know meaning of fieldwork in socio-cultural anthropology, importance of fieldwork in anthropology, different types of techniques and methods used in socio-cultural field research, how to demonstrate these techniques and methods in the field, and the ethical guidelines one must follow in the field. First of all, I'll briefly explain the fieldwork in socio-cultural anthropology. Fieldwork in socio-cultural anthropology refers to the study of people and their culture in their natural habitat. Anthropological fieldwork has been characterized by the prolonged residence of the investigator, his participation in and observation of the society, and his attempt to understand the inside view of the native people and to achieve the holistic view of a social scientist. Field studies have been the mark of socio-cultural anthropologists since the 19th century, when anthropologists first began to move out of the four-walled room to explore the so-called untouched and mysterious cultures and societies. This module will be discussing about different types of field methods or techniques used in the field of socio-cultural anthropologists. It will also try to highlight the demonstration of these field methods in a sequential manner, which type of field method is best suited for a particular type of situation, and limitations one may face during the application of these field methods. We can see that figure 1 shows the anthropologist Margaret Mead and Malinowski conversing with their respective respondents. Now, types of field techniques and methods in socio-cultural anthropology, what are they? As already mentioned above, fieldwork is the first-hand systematic exploration of the human culture by an anthropologist. Therefore, there are two approaches through which fieldwork can be conducted in socio-cultural anthropology. They are ethnography and ethnology. Now, what is ethnography? Ethnography is a descriptive account of the lives of the people in particular society. In this kind of research, the ethnographer is required to immerse in the culture and everyday life of the people who are subject of the study. Clifford Geertz, the famous American anthropologist, described ethnography as thick description to convey that it is both descriptive and interpretive. On the other hand, ethnology refers to the comparative and analytical study of different culture on the basis of ethnographic data. Adam Franz Kolar, who propounded the term ethnology, described it as the science of nations and people. However, ethnographic study is considered to be one of the most important approaches for conducting field research in anthropology so far, since most of the other anthropological approaches depended on ethnographical data. For conducting an ethnographic fieldwork, different methodology, methods, techniques and tools are demonstrated in the field for purpose of collecting data. It is imperative for every field investigator to have deeper knowledge about the different types of methods and techniques and tools one would be implementing before the landing to the field. The terms methodology, methods, techniques and tools have been used interchangeably many times, and it is very difficult to clearly demarcate these terminologies at times. However, in ethnographic or ethnological fieldwork, each of these terms carry different and significant meaning. Here the term method means the way of conducting and implementing research, while methodology means science and philosophy behind all research. Methodology also means the systematic and theoretical analysis of the methods applied in the field of study. On the other hand, a method could be the way of conducting and implementing research. A method is a combination of one or more techniques of research applied together to achieve a given end or task. For example, a case study or a focus group discussion are methods since they make use of more than one technique such as observation, interview, questionnaire, etc. to collect the needed information. However, a technique on the other hand, employment of a single way or manner so as to collect the necessary data or to achieve the target. For example, an interview or observation, if they are used alone, are called techniques. A tool is a device or instrument that is required to use in a particular technique to study a particular aspect in the field. For instance, if a field investigator wants to use interview technique, then interview guide or interview schedule becomes his or her research tool for collecting the data in the field. Socio-cultural anthropology fieldworks are based on the data collected through different methods and techniques such as observation, interview, administering of questionnaire, case study, focus group discussion, life history and genealogy. However, before starting with any of these techniques, one needs to get familiar with the field situations and get acquainted and friendly with the people whom a researcher is going to study. This is called rapport establishment, and it is first and most crucial step any ethnographic fieldwork. Now, what is rapport establishment? It is the preliminary step before starting on a fieldwork. Rapport establishment or rapport building means trying to establish a friendly relationship with the people among whom the fieldwork is to be conducted. This includes building up of a sense of trust among the people about the investigator that his or her presence there does not pose any form of threat or harm to the people or community. Cultural anthropologists often strive to build rapport and trust with the individuals in the community to carry out research more effectively and authentically before embarking on the field study. The first task in every successful research is to attempt to build rapport. Establishing rapport is all about matching ourselves with another person. For many, starting a conversation with a stranger is a stressful event. We can be at loss of words, awkward with our body language and mannerisms. Creating a rapport at the beginning of a conversation with somebody new will often make the outcome of the conversation more positive. One of the main points for rapport establishment with people under study is knowing a little bit of their language, such as how they greet each other or say hello to any new person, and to have some knowledge about their cultural pattern. Many a times it proves that hearing single word in their own language, even if it is broken in form, may open up a floodgate of love towards the researcher. It also means that a field investigator must be careful about how and when he or she visits a household instead of landing at somebody's house at a very odd timing. Talking politely and maintaining rapport subconsciously through matching non-verbal signals including body positioning, body movements, eye contact, facial expressions and tone of voice with the other person are some of the steps to be kept in mind by the researcher. In an ethnographic fieldwork, a researcher should not be too concerned about how much time she or he spends in just freely mingling with the people, because the success of the entire fieldwork depends on how much fieldworker and respondents are comfortable about each other. However, one should be careful about not getting over friendly with the respondent. This might lead to the bias on the part of the researcher. The figure 2 depicts the koala king. Now, the techniques for fieldwork in socio-cultural anthropology, what are they? Observation. Observation is the first step and the technique used for data collection in the field. It is one of the most extensively used techniques in anthropological fieldwork. Not all observations are scientific, and it should be differentiated from mere looking and seeing. As Srivastava supposes that observation may be defined as a systematic viewing which is intentional and planned. Here, the observer is aware that he or she is systematically viewing the unit under study. In this, the observer needs to prepare an observation guide which will help him or her to record and collect the required data. It is one of the most effective techniques through which a social researcher can collect a treasure house of data non-verbally. In a natural setting, observation starts as soon as the researcher lands in the field, starting from the landscape of the area, the infrastructures, the setting of the houses, and the routine activities of the people. However, in a laboratory setting, observations are done under four walls of the laboratory or through the keen eyes of the doctors while observing the patients. Certain preliminary understandings are to be kept in mind by the researcher while carrying out observations, such as establishing a good rapport with the people under study. In other words, the researcher needs to have a friendly relationship with the local people. He or she should be paying proper attention to jot down every minute details of the situation in life there is in the field. The things which are observed should be noted down exactly as it is without interpreting it, else it might dilute the real meaning of the situation. There are many types of observations which are implemented in the field according to the situation and the context. Participant observation. One of the main techniques social anthropologists use is the participant observation and is the most of the time the only ethnographic technique used. It is sustained, intensive, extended, or of a broad range, as Srivastava had put it in 2004. The term participant observation was first used by Edward Lindemann in his publication called Social Dictionary in 1924. It became a very popular and effective technique of the field study in anthropology after Malinowski's extensive study on the Trobriand Islanders, and trend is still continuing. In participant observation, the researcher gets first-hand experience of the people and their culture under study. The researcher tends to live with the people, eat with them, and also participates in every activity that is happening as a person belongs to that culture. In this kind of observation, the people under study are more comfortable in opening up, continuing with their normal behavior without any self-consciousness and also without raising any suspicion. This helps the observer to gain greater depth about social phenomena and also gather extensive data. Nevertheless, one should be conscious and aware of the problems of bias and reactivity in participant observation. In this technique, the events are interpreted through the single observer's eye. Therefore, his or her personal viewpoints can easily come into play. Again, since the researcher is so involved with the community and the people being studied, chances are that the objectivity might be lost in the process. Besides, as the researcher is a participant in the activities and events being observed, it is easy to influence other people's behavior, thereby raising the problem of reactivity, influencing what is being observed. Now, what is quasi-participant observation? In this kind of observation, the researcher's role is confined to that of a researcher, and he or she declares openly that he or she is a researcher instead of adopting the role in the community itself. Here, the observer actively participates in some of the ordinary activities and observe passively from distance in others. Many anthropologists therefore resort to this practice, as only quasi-participant observation gives the observer perform both the roles of the observer and the observed instead of disguising himself completely from the people. Therefore, this technique can avoid the demerits of participant observation, since it is not always possible for the researcher to take part in every activity of the people under study. As Srivastava in 2004 also elaborates that the choice of the field worker and the likes and dislikes should not be compromised while maintaining humility and respect for the people. This situation can be averted in case of quasi-participant observation technique. Many social research these days are conducted through quasi-participant observation because this gives more freedom to the researcher to learn as a participant when he or she needs to get involved, and could be an active observer when she needs to restrain himself or herself. Now, figure 3, this shows the technique for fieldwork. Non-participant observation, what is it? In this technique, observation is conducted without active participation of the fieldwork. In this, the researcher simply observes the activity of the people as a total outsider. Non-participant observation are useful and are being used by many researchers. However, its usefulness is questioned in simple societies where it may not be possible to keep a distance from the people. At the same time, pure non-participant observation becomes extremely difficult in certain social situations. One cannot penetrate into the heart of the matter without proper participation in it. One cannot imagine a kind of relationship when the researcher is always present but never participates. This situation is hardly conducive for both the observer and the group. Kurt Lewin in 2012 in his research paper Field Observation in Social Research says that there is always a danger of subjective interpretation, and there is a likelihood that an inactive or casual observer can misread the social atmosphere or mindset of the people and start characterizing them with the observer's own values rather than those who are immediately involved. Nevertheless, non-participant observation in its own right can fetch valuable data. As Warner and Lunt in 1939 also suggested that a variety of social situations can be studied by using the technique of inactive observation. These include study of certain factories, retail stores, sacred and secular rituals, issues of unemployment, and so on, as reported by Young in 2012. In non-participant observation, the objectivity or neutrality can be maintained. The observer in this type of observation gives a detached and unbiased view of the group. Besides, very often, many people feel shy to share or disclose their secrets to a known person, but share it freely to an unknown stranger, thinking that it may not have any long-lasting impact. Non-participant observers, therefore, get the advantage to catch hold of these informations. Now, what is structured observation or controlled observation? According to Srivastava, in structured or controlled observation, the frequency of the occurrence of a peculiar feature of the particular thing is counted. This kind of observation is carried out according to definite prearranged plans, which also include considerable experimental process. Thus, it is difficult to make an objective study and keep the observation free from biases and prejudice. It is normally difficult and also ethically wrong to impose control over the people or the phenomena in anthropological field research. Generally, controls are imposed on the observer. This helps the observer to have a precise idea about what he or she wants to observe, and information collected is reliable and undiluted. One of the most famous controlled or structured observation was conducted by Dorothy Thomas among the nursery school children for observing the behavior of the children. This was reported by Thomas et al. In 1933. This technique can be used for studying various social behaviors in different situations. Unstructured observation or uncontrolled observation. Unstructured or uncontrolled observation simply records what naturally occurring in the field setting, which Srivastava had mentioned in 2004. In other words, uncontrolled observation is form of observation which is made in the natural environment without being influenced by any external factor, or it is not predetermined. Most of the information about any social phenomena are gathered through randomly observing the natural environment of the community or the normal and routine activities of the people. Here, the observer does not have any list of items to be observed. Socio-cultural anthropologists mostly indulges in collecting information by randomly observing certain social situations. However, this often leads to loss of focus and wasting of long duration of time without much meaningful result. Now, what is interview? Interview is a procedure of collecting data where two or more people come face to face and have verbal interaction with the purpose. It involves at least two people, an interviewer and the respondent. There is a distinction between everyday conversation and interview. According to Young in 2012, interview is a conversation of gestures. He also elaborated that interviewing is not a simple two-way process between interviewer and the respondent. Voice inflection and halting statements play as much role in conversation as the facial expression, body gestures, glances and pauses in between. Goody and Hatt in 2006 says, interviewing is fundamentally a process of social interaction. In an interview, the researcher defines and controls the conversation. He or she can direct the flow of communication according to his or her requirement. The interviewer's personality may often play a role in an interview process, such as ethnicity, sex, social status, age, physical appearance, clothing and grooming, and in overall demeanor give an impact in many ways. In the initial phase of the fieldwork, ethnographer mainly depends on interview guide. This is list of topics which guide the interviewer to channelize the interview in the right direction. However, this interview guide does not have any structured questions as such. Therefore, these type of interviews are basically like free-flowing conversation and most informal in nature. Besides, there are many forms of interviews which are used in anthropological research. They are structured interview, unstructured interview, personal interview, group interview, focused interview, in-depth interview, clinical interview, and repeated interview, as mentioned by Young in 2012 and Srivastava in 2004. Now, what is structured interview? In structured interview, the interviewer prepares a set of questions in advance and seeks the answer of those questions from the respondents. In this type of interview, the interviewer asks each respondent the same series of questions with very small modifications. The questions mostly have limited sets of response categories. Majority of the questions are pre-tested and standardized. While interviewing, the use of the words and paraphrasing of the questions as well as the order of questions are kept consistent as far as possible. Besides, the interviewer plays a neutral role and does not try to insert his or her opinion to the respondent. This type of interview can yield qualitative as well as quantitative data. Therefore, it is widely used for collecting ethnographic data. The advantage of using structured interview is it maintains a uniformity and precision. In this, the interviewer bars can be reduced to a great extent, and it is also easy to administer the people under study. However, the interviewer has to remind the respondent from time to time if the flow of the conversation deviates from the original topic. This might sometimes annoy the respondent, and it would depend on how skillfully an interviewer handles the situation. Unstructured interview. In this technique, the interviewer does not have a pre-decided set of questions. Therefore, the interviewer has greater freedom and flexibility in the number of and sequence of the questions. The researcher can come up with any question related with the situation on the spot and also may probe further on it according to the requirement. In this type of interview, the purpose is given more importance than the framework of the interview. Unstructured interview can elicit a lot of general as well as insightful information. However, it could be very time consuming, and very often the focus of the interview might be shifted. The interviewer probes the respondent from time to time, otherwise the flow of interview might go entirely in a different direction. For collecting deeper qualitative data on particular social issue or aspect, unstructured interview is mainly used. Personal or individual interview is When an interview is confined to an individual informant, then it is called as personal or individual interview. This interview is conducted mainly to get information from the key informants in the community, such as traditional healers, priest, village head, midwife, etc. In this kind of interviews, the availability and willingness of the respondent plays an important role. Now, what is group interview? When a group of people is interviewed from ascertaining their opinions or views about a particular social issue, then it is called as group interview. These interviews are conducted to yield a general idea about people's perception concerning a particular issue. In this type of interview, a set of questions is prepared by the interviewer, and it is to ask the particular group, and the response are either recorded or noted down. Focused interviews take place with an individual known to have been involved in a particular situation. In in-depth interview technique, the interview is encouraged to express freely his or her understanding about an issue related to her or him, or ask to share a personal experience in detail. If this interview is repeated after a certain interval of time, it is called as repeated interview. Now, what is clinical interview? The interviews which are taken in order to gauge a person's physical health or psychological status is called as clinical interview. Life history. It is a qualitative research technique which shows the overall pictures of the respondent's life and all the important life events. It is also known as life history interview technique, since all the informations are collected by interviewing the respondents. The main purpose of this interview is to be able to describe what it is like to be this particular person, meaning the person who is being interviewed. Life history not only reveals certain facts about a person's life experience, but at the same time it uncovers the social situations and issues which could have impacted the person at different points of times. In this technique, many a times the respondent is asked to narrate his or her experience instead of asking close-ended questions. These forms of telling one's own story in his or her own way is called narrative method. Life histories most often focus on specific aspect of person's life, such as work life or a special role in some part of life of a community, or else it focuses on specific historical event, issue, time or place. This is cited from the Gubrium and Holstein 2002. Through the life histories, person keeps the worthwhile memories, experiences and collective values alive by telling others about them or putting them in a form that may last longer than ourselves. In a life story interview, the interviewee is a storyteller, a narrator of the story of his or her own life. The interviewer is a guide or a director in this process. The two together are collaborators, composing and constructing a story the teller can be pleased with. This was reported by Gubrium and Holstein in 2002. Figure 4, which you can see, depicts the life history technique for the fieldwork. However, in this type of interview, the quality of interview depends highly on the type of relationship the interviewer shares with the interviewee. There is high chances that when you are asking somebody to tell his or her life story or history about certain events, the person might deviate from the original incident and may not maintain its authenticity. Instead, he or she may reproduce into something which he or she thinks you might like to hear or you might be looking for. Research tools used for fieldwork in socio-cultural anthropology. What are they? Interview schedule. An interview schedule is a research tool used for collecting qualitative as well as quantitative data in the field. It is a standardized set of questions which are already pre-tested well in advance before administering it into the field. In this, the researcher and the respondent are in face-to-face contact, and the interview schedule is filled by the researcher himself or herself and interprets the question as and when necessary. Here, Goody and Hatt in 1952 defines interview schedule as a set of questions which are asked by an interviewer and is filled in on the spot in a face-to-face interaction with another person. From this definition, it is quite clear that the questions are asked and filled right there in the field as the interview proceeds. This provides good opportunity for the researcher to make the respondent understand the questions if there is any doubt. Therefore, the data yielded through this research device are quite accurate and trustworthy. There is also very less room for incomplete interview since the interviewer can always go back to the same respondent and complete if there is any partially filled interview schedule according to the convenience of the respondent. Besides, interview schedule can be used on both literate and illiterate people since the interviewer is going to be around during the time of the interview to help. However, this interview tool could be very expensive for the researcher since it needs a lot of physical documentation of the facts and also incurring of personal cost. After collecting the data on papers, the researcher has to fit it electronically for accurate analysis. These might consume a lot of time and prove time consuming. As the interview is going to be through personal contact with the respondent, the quality of data you receive will often depend on ability of the interviewer. Now, what is a questionnaire? A questionnaire is a tool for collecting and recording information about a particular issue of interest in anthropological research. It is mainly made up of list of questions which include clear instructions and space for answers or administrative details. Questionnaires do not involve face-to-face interaction between the interviewer and the respondent, unlike interview schedule. The questions are mostly closed-ended or answer categories are provided as options. The questionnaires are generally sent through mail or by post to the informants to be answered as specified in a covering letter, but otherwise without further assistance from the center. Postal and electronic questionnaires are also known as self-completion questionnaires since the respondents complete them by themselves in their own time. Research methods used for fieldwork in socio-cultural anthropology. Case study. As described by Srivastava in 2004, case study is a detailed account of the generic development of an individual, a group, an institution, an association, a community, or the total society. In this method, both interview and observation techniques are used to collect the necessary data. Anthropologists may present the case study in the form of a monograph. For instance, the study of Cooks by M. N. Srinivas and Evans Pritchard's study of Newer tribe. Another way of presenting case study is by comparing a number of cases pertaining to the same phenomena, aiming to arrive at certain submissions, as reported by Srivastava in 2004. Figure 5 shows the case study as a field work method. A case study is an empirical inquiry that investigates a contemporary phenomena in depth and within its real-life context, especially when the boundaries between phenomena and context are not clearly evident. Yen, 1984. In other words, you would use the case study method because you wanted to understand a real-life phenomena in depth, but such understanding encompassed important contextual conditions because they were highly pertinent to your phenomena of study. Nowadays, case method has become one of the major modes of social science analysis, including anthropology. Case study usually has a double purpose. On one hand, it attempts to arrive at a comprehensive understanding of the group under study, and on the other hand, it attempts to develop a general theoretical statement about the regularities in social structure and process. It is useful for collecting detailed qualitative accounts, which not only helps to explore or describe the data in real-life environment, but also helps to explain the complexities of real-life situations which may not be captured through experimental or survey research. Besides, in case study, the examination of the data is most often conducted within the context of its use, that is, within the situation in which the activity takes place. Along with numbers, usefulness of a case study method, it is not free from certain forms of difficulties in application. As Yen has rightly noted, too many times the case study investigator has been sloppy and has allowed equivocal evidence or biased views to influence the direction of the findings and conclusion. Case studies provide very little basis for scientific generalization since they use a small number of subjects, some conducted with only one subject. The question commonly raised is, how can you generalize from a single case? Besides, case studies are often labeled as being too long, difficult to conduct, and producing a massive amount of documentation. In particular, case studies of ethnographic or longitudinal nature can elicit a great deal of data over a period of time. The danger comes when the data are not managed and organized systematically. Now let's see what is genealogy. The genealogical method is the process by which a researcher, a collection of data about the kinship, family, marriage, which are prepared through the technique of the observation and interview. In this, a detailed kinship lineage is traced about a person termed as ego, which includes tracing both ancestors and descendants as long as ego could recount from his or her memories. Then, this is expressed graphically in a document called genealogy that shows family collections, the ego or the respondent. This document is housed in a graphical representation of social and historical situation, making it possible to give an overview showing their members in generation. Here, ego is the person through which the genealogy is being traced or the person of reference. The genealogical method was invented by W.H.R. Rivers during the Torres Strait expedition of 1898 to 99. According to Rivers, its primary purpose was to improve the analysis of social organization, that is, the concrete actuality of interpersonal relations and living arrangements. Later on, Malinowski in 1922 defined genealogy as synoptic chart of number of connected relations of kinship. The genealogical method has been used in the present times by combining with ego-centered network analysis. It has also been foundational in studies of the migration of ethnic groups to the United States. Focus group discussion. A focus group is a planned, facilitated discussion among a small group of stakeholders designed to obtain perception in a defined area of interest in a permissive, non-threatening environment. USAID 2008. Focus group interviews are interactive events guided by the skilled moderator, who is the interviewer, whose ability to stimulate participation, guide discussion, and probe directly affects both success in meeting research objective and the quality of data obtained. Focus groups are good for initial concept exploration, generating creative ideas, testing ideas, and determining differences among various groups of people. This also helps in understanding the beliefs and the perception of specified group or population, which are then communicated to policymakers and program planners. This method is dynamic and process-driven and attempts to maintain the interaction predominantly within group rather than between participating individuals and interviewer moderator. You can see in figure 6, it depicts the focus group discussion. Focus group typically consists of 7 to 10 people drawn from population that the researcher is interested in. It is best to select a group that is relatively homogeneous in order to reduce inhibitions and facilitate interaction. It is also important for the discussion moderator to create an environment where everyone is expected to participate and no perspective will be favored. The moderator poses some open-minded questions to guide the discussion, taking notes and recording the session so that the information can be analyzed later. Ideally, either 2 moderators or 1 moderator and an assistant should be available to facilitate the focus group. Moderators should be mentally alert, free from distraction, skilled at listening to other people in the group situation, and be able to listen and think at the same time. Effective time management is another essential aspect here, and also the ability to know when a topic is exhausted and when to wrap up the discussion. These days, tape recorders are being used for recording focus group discussions. However, they are prone to pick up the background noises. The moderator can attempt to make notes, or an assistant can try to capture exact phrases and statements made by the participants without interfering the course of discussion. Notes should be complete and usable in the event the tape recorder stops working. Notes taking and research aids. Taking notes is an extremely important aspect of fieldwork. It includes writing down of details of observation, producing transcript of conversation and interview session, describing the experience of living in different cultures and describing the usefulness of the techniques and methods in different field situations and improvising it according to the needs. Srivastav, 2004. This figure 7 shows the photography as notes making aid. Again, using research aids extremely important. Research aids means audiovisual instruments or devices used for enhancing the deeper understanding of a culture and also to retain the original memory of the people and the different experience. This includes tape recorder, video camera, digitized camera, etc. These help in capturing the original voice and producer of the interview sessions and also the people and the area and their original setting. It gives vivid memory of the things happened there and remain for a long time. Ethnographic films are being made these days and these are possible because of these field aids. Figure 8 shows the stepwise demonstration or implementation of the field method. Stepwise demonstration of the implementation of a field method is: step 1, reviewing of all the available literature through online searching or by visiting library. Step 2 would be the formulation of a research problem and deciding on relevance of the research and keeping of clear-cut goals of the research. Step 3 would be deciding on the place of fieldwork and also doing a background check about the culture and language of the place. Step 4 is reaching the field place and making arrangements for staying, which can also be prior to reaching the field. Step 5 is seeking permission from the local authorities like district collector, village head, village chief, sarpanch, or any organization functioning at the place and whose permission is required. Step 5 is very important: rapport establishment or trust building with the people of the area and gaining their trust and letting them know about the purpose of the fieldwork and also identifying the key informants. Step 6 is implementation of the field techniques such as observation and befitting interview techniques or administration of interview schedule or questionnaire on the topic of the study and later on collecting the questionnaires. Step 7 is the application of different field methods such as case studies, genealogies or focus group discussions. Step 8 is taking field notes and using of aids including videotaping, recording the interviews and taking photographs simultaneously with data collection. Step 9 is wrapping up the fieldwork after obtaining the required information. Step 10 is fitting the data electronically and analyzing it manually or through social research, different softwares like Atlas. Step 11 is writing the final report. Now, there are few ethical guidelines to follow in the field. A big issue in anthropological fieldwork is the question of ethics. It basically addresses questions about morality, including good and bad, right and wrong, justice and virtue, etc. Few ethical guidelines during fieldwork is getting informed consent. A respondent should be informed about the purpose of the research and the probable outcome. Writing down the information, recording or videotaping and taking photographs should be with consent of the respondent. Respect for persons, individuals must be treated as free and autonomous. This means that participants must be freely agree in writing to participate in your study with no coercion or harmful consequence should they elect not to participate. Participants must also be free to end their participation in your study at any stage during its development. Participants with diminished capacity must also be respected and protected. The ability for self-determination can become limited due to illness, mental disability or physical circumstances. Therefore, investigators must protect the welfare of people who participate in their research. This includes maintaining confidentiality in terms of their participation and the data collected from their participation. This was what Watkins told in 2016. Beneficence. Beneficence means not harming the participant physically, emotionally, or psychologically. The investigator needs to maximize the benefit and minimize any harm or risk to the participants in the study. Justice. The principle of justice applies to the population that you choose for your study. You should not choose a population just because they are easily available in a compromised position or because they are open to manipulation. The burden for research should be fairly distributed and related to the problem being studied. In addition, participants have a right to know the purpose of the research. Thus, truthfulness is a necessary ingredient of research design. Integrity. One should be forthright in describing to your participants the nature of your research. Spell out the duration and nature of your relationship with them. Further, you must treat the data you gather honestly, only drawing from those conclusions that can be legitimately justified. This was reported by Watkins in 2016. Let's now understand what we have learnt in this module. Till now, we have discussed about different types of field techniques and methods in socio-cultural anthropology. How important is rapport established for an anthropologist, as it is the preliminary step before starting on a fieldwork. We have also discussed different techniques to collect data like observation. There are different types of observations: participant observation, quasi-participant observation, non-participant observation, structured observation or controlled observation, unstructured observation or uncontrolled observation. Researcher can choose the method as per the objective of the study. Another method is interview. As we discussed, it is a procedure of collecting data where two or more people come face to face and have verbal interaction with a purpose. There are also different types like structured interview, unstructured interview, personal or individual interview, group interview, focused interview, in-depth interview, clinical interview, and so on. Life history is another qualitative research technique which shows the overall picture of the respondent's life and all the important life events. It is also known as life history interview technique since all the informations are collected by interviewing the respondent. We have also discussed research tools used for the fieldwork in socio-cultural anthropologies. Stepwise demonstration or implementation of the field methods are also discussed in this module. There are methods which help in. These are the methods which help an anthropologist to collect socio-cultural data in field. Thank you.